And the reality is that our economic security is part and parcel of our national security. And so it is in line with these values today that we introduce Amendment 334 to the National Defense Authorization Act, which states a sense of Congress that any appropriated increase to the combined national defense budget and the overseas contingency operations budget are matched dollar for dollar by non-defense discretionary spending increases. For years now, these spending increases have occurred concurrently and equally, keeping important parity between defense and non-defense discretionary spending. Because genuine national security depends on the health, vibrancy, and safety of our communities, we must ensure that this spending parity continues and that this Democratic Party principle carries on into FY18. Non-defense discretionary spending includes a host of funds that are crucial to the American people, from education to research to veterans' health care to transportation and even homeland security. NDD funding is absolutely essential to moving our country forward. Mr. Chairman, as Vice-Ranking Member of the Budget Committee, I echo the comments made earlier by our Ranking Member, Mr. Smith, about the dysfunction that we have as we have yet to consider an FY 2018 budget resolution, and we have only 23 legislative days before the new fiscal year begins. The effort to push through $696 billion in defense spending will trigger sequestration under the Budget Control Act, and our communities will pay the price in cuts to vital programs. This is senseless brinkmanship, and we must reject it. Sequestration would further hinder job creation and stall economic growth by cutting $2 trillion in discretionary spending for infrastructure that makes our communities thrive: roads, bridges, transit, railroad systems, broad ports, airports, waterways, schools, and safe, clean water systems. It will erode our investments in education, worker training, public health, and community development that strengthen the middle class and working families. And these shortfalls, Mr. Chairman, will hurt the American people and our economy and make us less secure as a nation. Budgetary gimmicks don't make our nation safer either, and that's why in the People's Budget, which we introduced in the Progressive Caucus, the Overseas Contingency Operations budget is actually zeroed out, as it is essentially a zero accountability slush fund used to avoid the restrictions imposed by the Budget Control Act. Some have pointed out that $10 billion of the $631.5 billion for the military-based budget needs is actually labeled OCO purely as a technicality to evade the Budget Control Act caps. This is in addition to the clearly marked $65 billion of OCO funds. By including OCO funding one-to-one match in our amendment, we're sending a message that we will not accept these efforts to undermine the best interests of our country and its people. Increasing opaque funding sources comes at the expense of our nation's infrastructure programs, education, and all the other things that I mentioned earlier. So to the extent that Congress provides relief from the post-sequestration funding levels for our military, responsible members of this body should be united in insisting that the same relief would apply to domestic discretionary spending. This amendment underscores the reality that economic security is national security. For these reasons, and to support the continuation of this important principle, we urge support of this amendment.